Good evening again. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you happen to be. This is John and Geoff from TKC Games on our vlog. Tonight we're going to have a little chat very briefly about Ukraine. We're getting a lot of conflicting reports nowadays about what's going on there. And then we're going to see where that takes us, to be honest. So about 15 minutes to this. Sit back, relax, listen to what we're going to say. You probably don't want to look at our ugly faces, and unfortunately don't have enough orange juice to get Geoff drunk. And I'm run out of Pepsi, so if Pepsi want to give me some that doesn't have aspartame in it, I'd be delighted, guys. Right, so I've been looking, Geoff, at what's going on, and the mapping that I'm seeing of progress, if you can call it that, in this war, implies to me essentially a stalemate.
Mm-hmm.
There may well be fighting going, particularly in the east and the southeast of Ukraine, but I'm not seeing anything that, if I were running the campaign from either side, would make me excited to think I'm either going to win or lose anytime soon.
Yeah, there really doesn't seem to be. I looked at the advances in Bakhmut, and what I found very interesting was that the Ukrainians pushed the Russians back, and there was insert on either side, and then they evacuated in Bakhmut. The whole thing just seems weirdly calm, even. I wouldn't normally say that because a news blackout is a news blackout and you have no idea the tempo of operations. But there did seem to be something weirdly nonchalant about the way that they just buzzed out of Bakhmut and then the Russians just occupied. But at the same time, I haven't really heard that much about Russian losses on the flanks.
Yeah.
So it feels like that was more of a repositioning by both sides than an outright, whatever, if you can call it a breakthrough, which it wasn't, even in this local tactical sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has crossed my mind is whether or not the Russians have decided that their mercenaries need to be removed for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And they have decided to essentially use the mercenary groups as cannon fodder, World War I style, go over the top boys, go and get killed, because politically they're an embarrassment. And there is a very old tradition, it goes back to the Soviet Union, particularly under Stalin, that people who are not competent and had made a mistake or who were in prison or whatever could be released and atone with their blood. There's various commissar orders and so on relate to that. Going back in time, we can look them up, talk about it again in the future, maybe take a look at Barbarossa, our board game that covers World War II on the Eastern Front, or the Great Patriotic War, if you like, from 41 through 43. We can do that easy enough. The other thing that I've heard, I mean, the press here has said, that the Ukrainians haven't started their offensive yet. It's going to happen. It could be tomorrow, could be next couple of days or whatever. And that I found fascinating because, number one, why is the Ukrainian Defense Secretary in an interview with the BBC saying we're about to start an offensive? That doesn't, to me, look like much common sense. One would have thought you'd save the press briefings to after the fact. I'm not sure, for example, that Israeli Defence Forces, when they went onto the offensive to retake bits of the Golan Heights in 73, sort of, said, by the way, guys, tomorrow morning we're going to go and attack the Syrians. I don't think that happened somehow. And I'm pretty sure that Monty didn't say to the British press on the 24th of October, we're going to go on the offensive in 1942. We're going to go on the offensive, guys, in the next couple of days. Well, am I missing something here?
I'm wondering if it's a very clumsy attempt at psyops by the Ukrainians, because prior to the invasion of Sicily, as far as I'm aware, we did try and give some hints we were going to go into Greece. We're going to attack here. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
Please pick this up, Admiral Raider, and do something with it.
Operation Mincemeat. Chuck a body with a plan over the side of a submarine, or with hints. Yeah. We also, by the way, just something I found out not that long ago, actually, as part of the Balkan Fury 2 work that we've been doing in Partisans, the British government essentially bribed all the various partisan bands to go on the offensive in the run-up to the Sicily invasion to reinforce Operation Mincemeat and various other deception measures we were doing to try and push the Germans to deploy more troops to the Balkans, not to Italy and the south of France. Just so you all know. And it actually worked reasonably well. They then, and the big stumbling block, I take it you're all aware that Mihailovich was abandoned by the British and Tito was given support by us because he was killing Germans, and costs be damned to that. Now, the reason we abandoned Mihailovich is the 1st Panzer Division was in Greece and it was redeployed to the Eastern Front without being hindered by any of Mihailovich's partisans. A deal was in place to let it go, and we got wind of it through Enigma and decrypts. And at that point, Winston Churchill said, forget about this guy's collaborating, give it to Tito. Which is an interesting little thought for you all just to go away and ponder. But I get your PSYOPs point, Geoff. I mean, but that's what we were playing at there, and the Germans kind of played at it a few times as well. The run up to the Battle of the Bulge, their immediate and panicked replanning because they had given away their plan in 1940 for the invasion of France. And I'm pretty sure in World War I there would have been stuff of a similar nature where, for Brusilov maybe or whoever, there would have been some kind of misinformation program going on. But the Ukrainians should have learned from the Soviets, who are world masters at Maskirovka, which is called deception and misdirection, guys. And that played with the German heads in World War II constantly. The Germans never quite knew where they were going to get hit. The intelligence might point to an offensive somewhere, we'll just say in the Kharkov area. Well, Oral's not that far from Kharkov. It's a couple 100 miles. Guess where the offensive was? It wasn't at Kharkov. It was at Oral or Kursk or whatever you want to come up with. The same further north. It was pretty obvious that we're always going to hit the reserve salient, and we've spoken about that before in these things that we do. The reality of it, though, and this is really important, you don't go to the Western press and say, guys, we're starting an offensive. You say we have multiple plans. Which may or may not include an offensive. You can't possibly say we're going to do it because there's only one place where fighting appears to be fairly constant, and that's down in the southeast. So you kind of think that that's flagging to the Russians. And
yeah, it's just one of those things where, I mean, remember when we were first talking about how the certain bits of the fighting looked very, very low scale. You know, you'd see a couple of bombs go off, and that was that. Yeah. And just before this video started, we had a look at the apparent waves of stuff the Russians have been sending at Kiev. And Mr. Bannerman here has seen an Asia Times thing saying that the Ukrainian offensive has been smashed by the massed Air Force of the Soviet, the Russian Air Force.
Just so you know, that's from the Eurasia Press. And I picked up my mobile phone. Unfortunately, I'm not a talented guy with an Android phone. But if you go Googling it, I know you can find this. And they're claiming that the offensive was launched last week. And essentially, it got pounded to death by this, I keep saying the Red Air Force, the Russian Air Force. Now, the Russian Air Force has about 2,000 aircraft, in theory. And we're taking a look at the other thing Geoff and I had a look at. We chat about these drone strikes in Kiev yesterday. I've just checked Google Maps. Kiev is approximately 55 kilometers wide by about 60 kilometers high, or vice versa. Yeah. So you're looking at 3,000 or 4,000 square kilometers of built-up urban area. That's Birmingham, or maybe 2/3 of London. Guys, if I throw a waste bin out a top floor flat and it lands in your head, it's really going to hurt. But the odds are I'm not going to hit you. So what we're looking at here is a drone that's got a 100-pound explosive charge on it. 50 of them, 52 of them were shot down. Apparently, we don't know what the other 2 did. There was 1 fatality, I believe. I think some guy was really unlucky that was refueling his car. and he dropped petrol, and bits of a burning drone set him on fire, and he died. I mean, poor guy. It's not good, but come on, this is hardly what you'd expect if, say, the United States Air Force were doing this, and they were doing, you know, a proper raid with a few B-52s dropping 70,000 pounds of ordnance each on the target area, or an equivalent number of cruise missiles fired from them. I'm not feeling the terror. I've got video that I can't show you because I don't want to get someone in trouble, but I have seen it of Belgorod last night. The lights are on, people are partying in the streets, the restaurants are open. It looks 100% normal. I know from someone who I believe may be a propaganda mole trying to get stuff across to us here in the West, that further east in Voronezh, life is going on as normal. This war is not having the impact that it would appear on the surface, at least, that it were being led to believe, particularly within Russia. The other fascinating thing, and this is again quite alarming, I know from talking to 3 or 4 Ukrainians here in the UK that almost 2 million Ukrainian men left before the law banning them leaving started. We know that a total of 12 million Ukrainians have left out of 40 million Ukrainians. If those men are of military age, it then starts to look at, did people vote with their feet? And I hate to be really negative here, but I've increasingly lost sympathy for the Ukrainians, not because I think them fighting is a bad thing, but because the more I hear, the less I believe in this populist view we're getting in our press here in the West that actually they're all in it together. They're not. It's a divided country, just the same as any other country. There's political differences between Geoff and I, potentially, or Andrew and I, or Bob and I, or Bob and Geoff, or whatever. That's not a crime. That's called freedom of speech. And that's something we should all be proud of, that we have it here in Britain. But if it's not the popular war that we're being told, that might go some way to explain why, after the initial fairly heavy fighting, we do know that happened, and you can see in a map where the Russians went, then were pushed out of or withdrew from, depending how you want to look at it. I personally think they left of their own volition to a large extent. If that is the case, it may be that there just isn't enough will in the masses on either side really to prosecute this war fully. What do you think, Geoff?
I'm trying to think of a frozen conflict, because China versus Japan, that reached the point, 1945, where both sides were completely whacked out. But that was ended by the Americans, who were not whacked out, pushing forward into wherever. Can't think of. I mean, maybe First World War, but that was two very powerful giants in unstoppable force versus immovable object. I honestly can't think of any modern conflict right now that has a sort of neither has a popular will. Iran-Iraq war, possibly?
Yeah, I think it petered out towards the end to a large extent. That was, I mean, we were in the Middle East at the time. It's actually one we should maybe talk about at some point. It was a bloodbath on both sides. And the Iranians actually still had some pretty good units. They'd been purged of a lot of the Shah's officers, but they weren't rubbish. And the Iraqi army was largely rubbish. Don't listen to all this crap about the wonderful Republican Guards. They were crap. And the Iranians only had 4 or 5 brigade groups or any good. But those 4 or 5 brigade groups, although they got whittled down over time, persistently won when they had to. The problem from both sides, though, was the vast bulk of the forces were guys with AK-47s with a little bit of artillery support, and maybe, I hate to say it, some weapons of mass destruction, because the Iranians were not quite as squeaky clean as everyone thinks. And it was World War One. And we are starting to see that. And I'm wondering if Putin and his senior lieutenants have decided that the mercenary campaign is a political necessity to get rid of them. They're an embarrassment to Russia, possibly, because they have been left in frankly, the one really nasty bit of combat that does appear to be going on, which is the street fighting in and around in the south. If that's the case, it does then tend to suggest that possibly the Chinese peace feelers have been accepted by both sides, but neither side really want to give up until they've given it one last roll of the dice. And if what I read in that article is true, and I'm not even going to put that up here because, yes, it is a genuine news agency, blah, 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 but it's not one I've ever heard of. So go look for it, Eurasia Press, and what they're saying is basically the offensive was launched, and much like the relief of Luhansk, they got their ass kicked. Now, if that's the case, the Ukrainians are no better for all the massive amount of training and the huge amount of money they've spent buying weapons from the West than the Russians themselves appear to be, which is not very good at the lowest levels. So, anyway, guys, I think we'll bring this one essentially to close just now. I've got a few things we're going to talk about in the next one. In it, we're going to actually tie into this. We're going to take a little look at why target sets don't seem to be stuck to in this. The Russians had a bit of success going on after the Ukrainian power net. They were getting a lot of success with some very fast-moving armor stuff at the beginning. They've changed strategy again and again and again. There's no consistency. Is there a precedent for that? And Geoff and I think there is. We'll be back in the next day or so. In the meantime, thank you all for watching. If you like what you see, or if you don't like it, hit the like button down below. Leave some comments. In general, enjoy it. And if you'd like to actually play some really amazing strategy games, do me a favour, take a look at our website, www.tkc-games.com. We've got some really cool special offers. And watch out as well for our 60 Degrees card game, hopefully coming to a store near you soon, because we now have a wonderful sales exec, Julie, and she is pushing that really hard. It's a brilliant little card game. So if you want something for your friends and family, you know, to go away on holiday with or whatever, take a little look, www.60degreesgame.com, or find us on Facebook as usual. So again, guys, thank you very much. Have a good day, have a wonderful evening, and have a good time. Take it easy. Bye-bye. That's it, Andrew. We're out of this one, mate. We'll just stop that now.